Hello everyone, welcome to the first video of this channel. It's a JavaScript video on recursion. We will be doing lots of web dev content, anything web, heavily focused on JavaScript, HTML, CSS, stuff like that. So let's get into the first video. I'm excited. So here we have an index.html file. Very simple file, brings in a style sheet for some very simple styles. We have a list item underneath a title, and that's about it. And we bring in a JavaScript file at the end of the body. Let's go look at that JavaScript file. That's what's going to drive this HTML file. Okay, so here we are going to use a recursive function to populate a list. So let's get started. First of all, let's bring in that list. Queries, that was list. Let's get an array with some strings in it. So we'll call it list items. This is the first. Give it some corny strings in here. Okay. We are targeting our list. We have an array full of strings. We need a counter that we will be changing. So let's use let. We'll call it loop counter. Set it to 0 because we haven't done anything with it yet. The counter's at 0. All right. So for the recursion, we need a function. So let's name that function recursive write. No, recursive list write. Now that needs to check a condition so that it doesn't always run, because we don't always want it to run. So we'll give it an if, and we only want it to run if the loop counter is less than the length of the list items, because we don't want it to run longer than the list is long. So loop counter is less than list items.length. Now we want to, before we, append anything to the DOM, we need to create the elements that we would be appending. So let's create an element. Call it a list item. And this is an li. We're putting it inside of a ul. Let's give it its text from the array of list items here. And we will use the loop counter as the target index. So it'll start with 0. We'll increment the loop counter and it'll go yada yada. So text content equals list items at index of loop counter. And lastly, we want to append that as a child to the list. There we go. Now comes one step that is very important for the recursion, and that is the increment of the loop counter. So you don't have to increment necessarily in a recursive function. You could just have a Boolean value that you'd check against and set it true when the recursive function can stop. You can have plenty of conditions that stop this, but in our case, we want to increment the loop counter by 1 each time. And then here is the recursive bit. The function calls itself at the end. So let's walk through this one more time. So we have a function that checks if the loop counter is less than the length of the list, creates a new li, gives it its text, and appends it to the list in the DOM, increments, calls itself again. So by the time it does it the third time, it won't pass this if, therefore it won't run anything and it will stop. So let's try this out. Let's open our little preview. We have recursion and an empty list. Let's call the recursive list write function on load. And let's save that. And there you go. You get your list populated correctly. Now, the order of these two lines is very important. If I swapped them and I save that, we would see some mayhem because we're not incrementing first. So it's just looping and looping and looping. You know, we just get a million of the same item. So order is very important here. We save it back to that and we get our list. Hopefully you guys found that informational, and this will be the style of videos that we do on this channel. There'll be short form content, not too in depth. I'm sure we'll release some videos where we go in depth on certain topics, but yeah, I like short, simple, to the point. So that's what we're going to give you. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next video.